Hi guys, thanks for coming out and viewing my channel. Today is going to be all about sharing information. As many of you know, one of the key specializations in my clinic is treating and protecting against the flu. And in order to be effective with that, I believe that it's important to stay up to date on the latest research. So today I'm going to spend time sharing with you the latest research on the flu vaccine. Did you know that the flu is the number one safety risk to human health? In fact, the CDC and a global health organization estimate that we have around 300,000 to 650,000 deaths annually due to flu respiratory infections. Now, that doesn't include complications due to having the flu, such as cardiac arrest or some other type of complication. When we're talking about the flu, in general, we're talking about two types of flus. We're talking about the Influenza A and the Influenza B. And under the A, we are more concerned about one type of strain, which is the H3N2. And this strain is the one that's been causing us so many problems. In general, these viral strains last for about 10 years, and we're seeing the H3N2 should be coming to the end of its 10-year life. If I look at what's happened in clinic this year, and if I look at the statistics out there, it appears that H3N2 has run its 10-year course, and hopefully we've got a 10-year window to help address some of the things that happened with this strain. Now, during this strain's life, a couple things happened. First, we saw that we had two pandemics, at least two pandemics. We had one in 2009 where this virus mutated, and then we had another one in 2013 where we had a drift, and then last year we saw another drift and another really horrible flu season. The other thing that happened with this strain in particular is we saw our vaccine effectiveness drop to 0. So what does that mean? So what is vaccine effectiveness? It measures the proportionate reduction in hospitalized cases among a vaccinated population. Okay, and it's not just the WHO or the CDC that are tracking the flu and monitoring it. We have the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, the Public Health Agency of Canada. We've got the Humanitarian Pandemic Preparedness Organization, and then we have the Australian Health Department, which we use to monitor what's happening in the flu season, because that pretty much tells us what's going to happen in our flu season here in the United States. I guess I didn't realize when I first started looking into the flu at just how global it was and how serious the whole world takes the flu. And I guess what I also didn't realize is that vaccine effectiveness, a good year is 40%, so that there's a 40% reduction in hospitalization cases among vaccinated people. A bad year, and when they consider it completely ineffective, is if it's 10% or less. Now, there's just one point that kind of bums me out about the CDC this year. The CDC still hasn't reported numbers for last year's flu season, which was pretty severe. And they are still quoting an unpublished study of 40% effectiveness, which is at odds with everybody else who's reported out there. So the rest of the world's reported last year's flu vaccine was getting pretty close to being ineffective. The Australian Health Department reported a 16% vaccine effectiveness. The FDA came out a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and said that they saw the vaccine effectiveness at 19% here, which is in stark contrast to what the CDC is reporting on an unpublished uh, report of 40%. And I guess that really bums me out because, as you can see, with all the people that are involved in this, the flu is a really, really serious issue. And what's going on with the H3N2 is a really, really serious issue that is impacting our ability to use vaccines for the flu and how we move forward with vaccines. So I was pretty disappointed to see that the CDC, this is the first time that I've been a little hesitant to go out there and use information off their website because it may not be factual. So big bummer for us as a population, big bummer for the world who needs to work together to address some of the things going on with the flu. And let's hope that we can see better work coming out of the CDC in the next year or so. So let's look at what vaccines are supposed to do. There's a virus out there, which is the H3N2, and our immune system makes an antibody, which is a key which will attach to the antigen and neutralize it. Unfortunately, that is not what has been happening with the H3N2. And what we've seen is that this key no longer attaches or fits into the H3N2 antigen that's been created by our vaccines, allowing it to propagate in the body. Okay, so what happened with this one? We've been manufacturing the flu vaccine for a really long time, and we grow the virus in chicken eggs. We've been manufacturing this for 70 years. So we have 70 years of experience growing in chicken eggs. And that H3N2, that's been around since 1968. So we've been growing flu vaccines for the H3N2 for a long time. So, what's different here? What happened with this time around? And the big thing that happened that was a little bit different was about the antigen. There's one active area on the influenza virus, and that is where the key or our antibody attaches. Now, these when we create flu vaccines, we always get mutations. The problem this time is that the mutation's been happening in the active area on the antigen or where the lock is created. So for this H3N2, the lock that that's created when we grow the virus in chicken eggs has a mutation. And this time, the problem with the mutation is that it is an avian lock. It's a bird lock instead of a human lock. So, and the problem with this mutation is that it's happening consistently. There was research studies coming out as early as 2013 talking about that they were seeing a mutation happening in the active area in the virus instead of in some other area where it's usually happened. This time it was happening consistently in the active area where we actually which is the lock for our antibody. So we make human or mammal antibodies or mammal keys, and they don't fit into this avian lock that's been created. What this mutation means is that the vaccine is not effective or has a low effectiveness against the H3N2. And lately it's not effective against the H3N2. The problem has been that the majority of the hospitalizations were the H3N2. And this is probably due to when these viruses come back into the environment, there's a 10-year cycle that they go through, and the H3N2 has been the dominant flu strain through its 10-year cycle. Now, the data is starting to suggest that this 10-year cycle is almost over. In fact, this year, the flu strain, the dominant strain was the H1N1. So big difference in the strains. That strain is also the vaccine is very effective against that strain. So we're seeing the flu vaccine effectiveness has gone way up this year, from 19% last year to 47% maybe this year, if not higher. So there's just a couple more things that was really interesting about the research out there on the flu vaccine, specifically with the H3N2. One of the things that they found is that repetitive vaccinations are reducing the antibody titers in the individual. So that was really fascinating. And here's the name of the study on that. You'll see at the end of this presentation all the references to access the studies. And then to address some of the shortfalls of the chicken eggs, they made two new flu vaccines, a cell-based and a recombinant. And the cell-based is manufactured in dog kidneys. This was approved for use in Europe in 2009, and 2016 is when we approved for use here in the United States. There's only one company that makes it. Seqirus has a plant here in the United States, and the hope was that by using a mammal, it would produce a lock that our key can access. So it was hoping that this vaccine would create an antigen that had a lock to it that our antibodies or our keys could access. And there is another hope is that this method would not be constrained by egg production. So if we had a huge pandemic and we needed to make vaccines quickly, there's a risk right now with chicken eggs because how quick can a chicken produce eggs? And the name of this cell-based vaccine is Flucelvax, and I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly because, you know, in medicine, they don't like using real words. So this is how it's spelled, though. And the other one is the recumbent, and this one is manufactured in insect cells. And again, only one company has approval to produce. This one I haven't done a lot of research on this vaccine yet. The cell base seems to be used more. And the name of this one is Flublock or R or this RIV3 maybe. Now going back to the one that's made in the dog kidneys, the cell base, the Flucelvax, we've got some preliminary results, and the FDA just released a statement that they thought we got a 20% improvement over last year. So that would take us from 19% to 23%. They just gave numbers. There is no data or charts or anything with it. So, you can't really tell if this was with the H3N2 or if it was with some other strain. Kaiser also released for the same season, and they indicated that they showed no improvement. And here is their study, or details on their study. What they said is the relative vaccine effectiveness of cell cultured based versus egg based against the influenza A, which is the H3N2, was 8%. So, you know, the FDA says 20, these guys say 8. And they say, but the difference between the two was non-significant. So right now, it depends on if you're looking at glass half full or half empty. The FDA is saying, I'll take any improvement. And Kaiser is saying, well, statistically, it's not that significant. So we have a lot going on right now with the flu vaccine, and it's really all centered around this H3N2, the one that's been making us so sick, that's been keeping us so sick for so long, that's been so virulent, that's caused multiple pandemics and caused a horrible 2017 to 2018 flu season, has also reduced the effectiveness of the vaccines to almost complete. Well, against the H3N2, it appears that they're not effective at all. So there's a lot going on the H3N2. Besides all that, this virus is mutating in the active site of the antigen or virus, and the active site is where our antibody attaches. There's discussions that this mutation has made the virus more virulent, and as it can now evade our immune system. And there's also a risk on egg production in a pandemic with a new virus. They don't think we can get enough eggs to create vaccines in an efficient and quick manner. Then we have these new vaccines that have come in. We've got the vaccines from the dog kidneys, the vaccine from the insects, and they're hoping that these are going to address the shortfalls of the egg production. And the initial feedback suggests that the H3N2 is continuing to evade the vaccines, but it does appear that we can ramp up faster with the new technologies. So we've got a win, and we need to go back to the drawing board. So we're not out of the woods, but we might get a reprieve. As I said earlier, these viruses, they come back and they hang out for about 10 years, and then they go away again just naturally, and then they'll come back at another date and time. So right now, it looks like we're at the end of the 10-year cycle for the H3N2. I'm hoping we are. Preliminary data out of Australia shows that the majority of the flu virus was in H1N1, which is great. It's finally not in H3N2. And we're showing the vaccine effectiveness is much higher against the H1N1. But why we're not out of the woods is because we still haven't answered any of the questions that have happened with the H3N2. The mutations in the active area of the antigen poses a huge risk because another virus could do that. We haven't really figured out a solution to that, and right now there are two alternatives. This H3N2 seems to be able to evade them also. So there's a huge risk out there with the flu, and hopefully, more people will be able to start researching this and coming up with additional solutions. But what I'd like to do is thank you for watching. This was kind of long and grueling. Here's some of the references to information that I used for this article or for this presentation. And I want to thank you for watching. So until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.